I have always been a woman of certainties. At 60, my life had already been shaped by the choices I made, and I knew exactly who I was: a mother, a friend, a host. My home has always been a refuge, a place of constant love, of deep bonds with my children and nephews. I have always welcomed them with affection, with an open heart, as if they were my own children. But there was one of them who, as the years went by, began to affect me in a way that I could not control.
Matt.
My youngest nephew, whom I accompanied during the pregnancy, helped bathe, changed diapers, and grew up under my watchful eye. At the time, he was always just another mischievous boy, who laughed at silly jokes, ate my condensed milk pudding as if it were the most delicious thing in the world, and talked about his adventures with Ben as if the world were always a big joke. I saw him as just another son, with no other thought than the genuine affection I felt for him. But time passed, and Matt grew up, and suddenly, that mischievous boy had turned into a man I could no longer ignore. I would see him enter my house, his eyes now more serious, more intense. His smile was still the same, but there was something else behind it, something that made me alert. He had become athletic, his body sculpted by hours of training. But that wasn't all. Something in his eyes had changed too. When he looked at me, it was as if I was more than just his best friend's mother. As if he saw me in a different way, and I didn't know how to deal with that. Despite that, he kept coming, of course. It was natural. He still went to see Ben, still sat on my couch, still joined in the conversations, but something had changed, and I knew he felt it too. Whenever he could, Matt would find a way to get away from the group and talk to me, and I didn't know how to react. I, who had always looked at him with affection, now found myself watching his every move, every smile, every word he said. He always seemed to want to please me in a subtle but clear way. And worse, it seemed like he knew, somehow, that I was beginning to see him in a different light. I fought against these feelings. I tried to convince myself that it was just a phase, a passing phase, perhaps a simple recognition of his maturity. But no, I knew it wasn't just that. Every time he looked at me with that flirtatious smile, every time he got closer to me, my heart skipped a beat. And if I was honest with myself, I knew he felt it too. There was something there, something between us that could no longer be ignored. But how could I, his aunt, look at Matt and see anything more than the boy who had grown up before my eyes? It was too complicated. I knew it wasn't simple. And yet, I couldn't help but get lost in the small exchanges of glances, the conversations that went on and on, the way he leaned in to listen to me so intently, as if my words were the most important in the world. It was a constant internal struggle. I knew he was becoming more than a familiar presence. He was becoming something much more complex and dangerous. And although I tried to push these thoughts away, the truth was that I didn't know what to do with them anymore. I knew that Matt felt it too, but did he know how much this was affecting me? I couldn't let this confusion take over me, but I also couldn't deny the attraction, the desire, and perhaps even the fear of what could happen if we ever let this happen. And so, between the affectionate gestures and the words spoken with a softness that touched me in an unexpected way, I found myself increasingly adrift, trapped in this silent dilemma that not even I knew how to solve. The night was quieter than usual in that house, as if the silence was a way of hiding what had happened during the day. I knew that Matt, as usual, would have slept somewhere on the couch after the party. Ben and his friends had gone out, and as always, Matt preferred to stay up late, chatting with my son, before surrendering to sleep in some quiet place. I was still in the kitchen, trying to relax and distract myself a little from the night's routine. The clock read after 2 in the morning, and the house was profoundly silent. That's when I heard light footsteps at the kitchen door. I looked up, surprised, and found Matt there, his expression a little blurry, his eyes heavy, but still alert enough to notice me. "Aunt Rachel?" His voice was soft, slurred, as if he was still fighting the effects of the drink. "Hi, Matt," I replied, with a discreet smile, trying to keep the moment light. I knew what had been happening between us, but at that moment, the fact that he was there, at that time of the morning, seemed like an opportunity for something new, something I wanted to explore. He leaned a little against the door, watching me as I stirred the pan on the stove. He was wearing a loose t-shirt, his hair a little messy from the night and the drink. There was something vulnerable about him in that moment, something I couldn't ignore, and for some reason it seemed to draw me in even more. He never usually showed up this late, and with a sigh, I realized he was wanting something more, maybe without even knowing it. "I couldn't sleep," he said, shaking his head. I've been thinking about something, and I can't get it out of my head." I turned to him, not hiding the smile that appeared automatically. The soft light from the kitchen illuminated his face, and I could clearly see the details of what he was trying to hide. He was trying to open up, and that honesty made me want more. "Something like what?" I asked, my voice low, as if we were sharing a secret. Matt took a step forward, closer to me, and my heart suddenly raced. He seemed to hesitate for a moment, as if he were weighing each word. For a moment, I thought he was going to give up, but then he took a deep breath and said, almost in a whisper, "Aunt Rachel, I know something has been happening between us. I don't know exactly what it is, but every time you look at me, every time we talk, I feel different. And I don't know what to do with it anymore." I didn't know if he was just a little drunk or if his words were really coming from a deeper place, but something inside me was telling me to enjoy the moment. I couldn't help the smile that appeared on my face, like a silent response to what he had just said. "Matt," I began, trying to keep my voice calm, but with a hint of teasing. "You've been drinking, haven't you? Drinking has this effect on people. It makes them say things they might not even remember the next day." He laughed softly, but his eyes didn't leave mine. Something was different there. He was more confident now, more sure of himself, and it excited me in an unexpected way. "I know what I'm saying, Aunt Rachel. It's not just the drinking. I've felt it before, but I didn't know how to put it into words. And I think you feel it too, you're just afraid to admit it. Isn't that right?" There was a growing tension between us, something palpable in the air. He was closer to me now, almost to the point where our breaths mingled. His gaze never wavered, and I could no longer hide the knowing smile that was taking over my face. The joke was taking shape, and the desire to flirt with him was stronger than I had imagined. "I don't know, Matt," I said, lowering my voice, as if I were playing his game. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm afraid to admit something that I never thought could happen. But who knows? The night has its mysteries." He moved even closer, and for a moment, our bodies were almost pressed together. I felt the heat of his presence, his scent mixed with the aroma of the kitchen, and the tension grew between us like an electric current. I knew that, deep down, he was wondering if I would push him away or invite him to something more. And for a moment, I couldn't resist. Before I could say anything else, he touched my arm, running his fingers over my warm skin. The gesture was a silent invitation. "I think we can put our fears aside for today, right?" he murmured teasingly, and he could see the answer in my eyes. For a second, all I wanted was to feel his closeness, this feeling that had been growing for a while. I knew he probably wouldn't remember it tomorrow. The alcohol would have erased much of the memory of that conversation, but at that moment, all that mattered was the chance to see where that tension could take us. I didn't care about tomorrow. I just wanted to live in the now, without ties, without limits. Time seemed to have stopped in that kitchen lit only by the soft light of dawn. The world outside was quiet, but inside me, everything was in motion. The heat between us intensified, as if our energies were merging without any more words, without any more questions. The pressure in my chest, the nervousness, everything mixed with a deep desire that could no longer be contained. He was so close that I could feel the heat of his body, the accelerated rhythm of his breathing mixed with mine. His eyes were fixed on mine, and there, in that moment, I knew there was no going back. I could feel the tension vibrating in the air, and at the same time, something inside me seemed to finally release a freedom that had been repressed for so long. His smile was soft, but there was an urgency in his hands that he couldn't hide. He leaned forward slightly, almost as if he was waiting for a signal from me, and in that moment, I didn't think twice. The inner voice that tried to hold me back faded away before the force of what was happening between us. I leaned in too, and without further hesitation, our lips met. It was as if the whole world had fallen apart, and all that was left was that kiss, that touch, that explosion of feelings. I felt the taste of his mouth, soft but urgent. The kiss was deep, almost desperate, as if we both knew it was something that needed to happen now, in that moment, and that there was no room for any more doubt. His fingers ran down my back, making my body shiver, and I returned it, pulling him even closer, as if I wanted to merge with him, to dissolve any distance between us. The feeling was electric. Each second felt like an eternity and, at the same time, like a flash of lightning. I could no longer tell where my skin ended and his began. It was all one thing, a pent-up desire, a desire that had been stifled for so long, now finally spilling out without reserve. When we finally pulled away, our faces were so close that we could feel the heat of our panting breaths mingling. I saw in his eyes the same surprise, the same intensity that I felt. He was there, still so close, still so present, and neither of us seemed to want to move away. The silence that followed was charged with a new complicity, a mutual understanding of what had just happened, as if we finally knew what we could no longer ignore. And, even though I knew that what we had done would be difficult to explain, something inside me whispered that there was no regret. And what was sealed, I knew could not be easily undone. Thank you for listening to me. Comment below if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to receive the continuation.